What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, we're going to break down who is going to win the NFC East between the Eagles, Cowboys, Commanders, and Giants. I'm going to start out on who I think is going to finish in fourth place, and that's going to be the Washington Commanders. Somehow they were able to get an 8-1 record last season. Their team is mediocre at best. They do have some, players that are pretty decent, but as a whole, their defense is, borderline being elite, but their offense is still hot garbage. They didn't really do anything to address the quarterback situation. It looks like it's going to be a three-pronged approach between Sam Howell, Jake Fromm, and Jacoby Brissett. I think Jacoby Brissett ends up winning the battle, but we'll see how that happens. They rank 24th in points, 28th in total yards per play, 20th in total yards per game, 28th in rushing yards per attempt, and rushing yards per game 12th, and passing yards per attempt 22nd, and passing yards per game 21st. But if you look on the defensive side of the ball, points allowed ranked 7th. They only allowed 20 points per game last season, which is incredible. Total yards per play is 5.2. That ranks 12th. Total yards per game, they only average giving up 304 total yards, which ranked 3rd. Their passing defense was super elite, with passing yards per game under 200 at 191 yards. Their defense has a potential to be a top 5 defense in the NFL, and they probably have the best defense in the NFC East, but their offense is just so bad. It's absolute bush. They're going to struggle to score points, man. The only games they're going to win is where their defense, allows less than probably 14 points per game. They're only averaging 18 points per game, and they somehow still won 8 games, which is absolutely crazy. All right, let's take a brief look into this schedule, see what it looks like. It's not too bad considering an 8-8 record. They go Arizona, Denver, Buffalo, Chicago. Buffalo and Philly are super tough games, but Denver is really unproven. Arizona is extremely inconsistent, and Chicago is, pretty bush. And then we go Atlanta, New York Giants, Philly again, New England, Seattle. Atlanta's a winnable game. The Giants, you never really know who's going to show up, and division games are always tough. Then they got the Birds. Then they got the Patriots and the Seahawks. Playing in Seattle and New England is never easy. They are two of the hardest places to play in the NFL. And it's going to start to get a little cold then in November. We got November 5th, we got at New England, and November 12th at Seattle. That's going to be a tough little stretch. And then we go back to New York, and then we go Dallas, Miami, Rams, Jets, San Francisco, and Dallas. The last 4 weeks are extremely tough. They got to fly across the country to go play the Rams, and then back across the country to go play the Jets with Aaron Rodgers. And then they have a home game against San Francisco and another home game against Dallas. Dallas could be in a potential playoff hunt then, so they're going to be tough. The week before, San Francisco is definitely going to be in the hunt. They were 1 win away from going to the Super Bowl last year, so their schedule is not easy. I think Washington's probably going to go in that 6-11, 7-10 range this season. All right, let's go to this roster. Let's break down the roster a little bit. I want to go to the depth chart, see what's going on here. All right, some of their key additions this offseason are Jacoby Brissett, offensive tackles Andrew Wiley and Trenton Scott, and Nick Gates. They're really trying to replenish that offensive line and help protect the quarterback. And they added defensive lineman Abdullah Anderson and linebacker Cody Barton and edge rusher Effie Obadiah. All right, some of the key losses. Tyler Heineke and Carson Wentz, their quarterbacks, are both out of the picture. So who knows what's going to happen at quarterback. I assume Jacoby Brissett, with his experience, is going to start the season as the starter. But then, if he struggles, Sam Howell will probably get a shot. And then they also lost running back J.D. McKissick, who's a pretty decent running back. Receiver Cam Sims. Offensive guards Trey Turner and Wes Schweitzer. And then center Nick Martin. They also had a pretty decent draft. They had the 16th and 47th pick in the first 2 rounds. They decided to go with cornerback Emmanuel Forbes and safety Jardavius Martin, a team that was very successful on the defensive side of the ball. Drafting 2 secondary players with the first 2 picks makes absolutely no sense to me. I don't know what the hell they're doing. And then they went offensive lineman in the 3rd and 4th round with Ricky Stromberg and Braden Daniels. And then they went edge rusher and running back in the 6th round. I don't know. The Commanders are just going to be the Commanders. They're going to do what the Commanders do. But besides Terry McLaurin, this team is lacking a lot of depth on the offensive side of the football. We'll see what Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson bring to the table. And the running back room is, bare with Brian Robinson Jr., Antonio Gibson, and Chris Rodriguez Jr., the rookie. But we'll see what happens. I don't see them being too successful. If they win 6 or 7 games, I wouldn't be surprised. If something goes off the rails and they only win 4 or 5 games, that wouldn't totally surprise me. But that's what I think about the Washington Commanders. The only thing that's going to keep them in games this season is their defense. And their defense is so good, they're going to be able to steal games from other teams that are, underestimating them. So that's why they won 8 games last year. I think a lot of teams underestimated them and they came in playing flat and they were able to get some big wins. All right, everybody, let's move on to, I think, who's going to place 3rd in the NFC East this season, and that's going to be the New York Football Giants. It was a really tough decision between them and the Cowboys because I don't really think the Cowboys have improved that much. They have a solid roster, not a great roster, and they all just pretty much got a year older. But the Giants, they're so hit and miss, man. Their defense was not very good last year. They were 18th in points allowed, 24th in total yards per play, 25th in total yards per game, 31st in rushing yards per attempt. They let up over 5 yards a carry. So if you have a running back in your fantasy team, play them against the Giants for sure. And they ranked 27th in rushing yards allowed per game at 144. That is absolute bush. Their offense is okay. I think Daniel Jones is slightly above mediocre, but the addition of tight end Darren Waller could really improve that offense. Having a reliable tight end that you can go to on the reg with Saquon Barkley, this offense could be a little bit better than they were last year. They were one of the best running attacks in the NFL with averaging 4.8 yards per attempt, which is 5th in the NFL, and the rushing yards per game at 148, ranked 4th. So the run game is really there. They really just have to improve on the pass game. And if Darren Waller can be that, Travis Kelce in that offense, they could be a lot improved. They won 10 games last year, which, I think they overachieved a little bit. I think they're going to win in that 9 or 10 wins this season. But if Daniel Jones can get in a symbiotic relationship with Darren Waller, they can get on the same page, they could possibly compete with Dallas for that 2nd place and a wild card playoff spot in the 2023 season. All right, let's take a look at this schedule, guys. Let's break it down. For their 10-8 schedule, they're going to have a slightly, tougher schedule than they did the year before. They go Dallas, Arizona, San Francisco, Seattle, Miami. That's tough sledding. That Dallas game opening week will tell a lot about these 2 rosters, so my opinion might change depending on how this game goes. Now, Arizona they're just a mediocre team. Some days they look like world beaters, and you're like, who is this team and why are they so bad? San Francisco is elite. Luckily, they get to play Seattle in New York, so they're going to have to fly across the country to go play New York, so that's good for them. And then they got to go to Miami and Buffalo, which are going to be tough games. Miami is on the cusp of becoming a playoff team, and Buffalo is a staple there. Josh Allen and the Bills are going to compete for a Super Bowl title again this year, so that's going to be a challenging game. Then we go Washington, New York, Las Vegas. That's a tough stretch too. Washington's not very good, but New York is okay, and Vegas, we'll see how they are. We'll see what's going to happen in Vegas. That's not the toughest stretch, but, we'll see what happens. Then they go Dallas, Washington, New England, Green Bay, and New Orleans. Both those teams I don't think are going to be pretty good. Then we go Eagles, Rams, Eagles. It really sucks that that's how they end their season because if they're fighting for a playoff spot, we'll see if the Rams can have a bounce back year and if Matt Stafford is really healthy and ready to compete. But, the Eagles are definitely going to be in the playoff hunt unless there's some sort of catastrophic injury to Jalen Hurts. So those games are going to be tough. It's going to be a tough stretch. Schedule is like not super hard, but it's not really easy either because their division's pretty tough with the Cowboys and the Birds. And then they got to play games in the AFC East with Buffalo and Miami. I'm going to stick with my guns. I think they're going to go in that 10-8 range again. I don't think they're going to improve too much. I don't think they're going to drop too much. 10-8 seems about right for the New York Football Giants. All right, let's break down this roster a little bit. We're going to go to the depth chart. All right, let's break down this depth chart, everybody, guys. Some of the key additions to the roster are wide receivers Paris Campbell and Jamison Crowder. Crowder was a slot receiver from Washington. He's pretty good. I like him. And then the big addition of the offseason is tight end Darren Waller, who's an absolute savage. They also added to the defense a little bit. Linebacker Bobby Okereke, I butchered that name. Rakeem Nunez-Roches and Ashawn Robinson to the D-line. And cornerback Amani Uramaroit. Man, those names are an absolute shit show. Jesus, mother of God. All right, some of their key losses are Galladay, Richie James, and wide receiver Marcus Johnson. None of those guys really contributed too much. Kenny Galladay was kind of a bust for them. And they lost some offensive line depth with offensive guard John Feliciano and center Nick Gates. And for the draft, they addressed cornerback, the center position, and wide receiver in the first 3 rounds. And then they went running back, D-back, D-tackle with the 5th, 6th, and 7th pick. I mean, pretty much the whole crew's coming back. Daniel Jones, Saquon's coming back on a 1-year deal. They also have Matt Breida, who's really good complimentary piece to Saquon Barkley. The wide receiver position is going to be the biggest question mark with Hodgins, Slayton, and Campbell. They are not the best wide receivers. And Sterling Shepard, we'll see what he brings to the table after. I think he's coming off an injury, so we'll see what's up with that. The offensive line should be a little bit better after playing for a season. And then we move on to the defense. The defense is not awesome. There's no real superstar on the defense that's going to be a game changer. I don't see it right now, but hopefully they are able to gel a little bit together. But I like the Giants. I don't love the Giants. I think 10-8. If they overachieve, they can win 11 games. If they underachieve, it could be in that 7 or 8 range. All right, let's move on to the team that's going to come in second place in the NFC East. All right, everybody, here is a team I think is going to finish second in the NFC East, and that is America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Last year, I think they overachieved with that 13-6 record. Their defense is, not so good against the run, but they were pretty effective against the pass. And they ranked 4th in points per game at 27.5, which is really impressive. But all their other metrics kind of, 16th in yards per play, 11th in total yards per game, 18th in rushing yards per attempt, 9th in rushing yards per game. You got to remember, Ezekiel Elliott is gone. Tony Pollard will be the number 1 back this year. Their defense is a little bit better. Points allowed per game ranked 5th, and total yards per play ranked 8th. And they were also 8th against the passing yards per game. But rushing yards per game, they were all the way at 22nd, allowing almost 130 rushing yards per game. So that's where they have to improve. All right, let's take a look at the schedule, everybody. Break it down and see what it looks like. They open up the season against the New York Giants. That's going to be a really determining game in the NFC East. Let's see who's going to be the better team. The Giants have improved their roster. The Cowboys really haven't improved too much. So let's see if those, new additions to the New York Football Giants is going to help them get a W. Then we go to the Jets in Arizona and New England. That's not the hardest stretch of games there. With New York, you don't really know what you're going to get with the Aaron Rodgers, especially early in the season. And Aaron Rodgers is known for starting slow and then coming on late in the season, so that might be a winnable game there. Arizona, mediocre. New England is also mediocre. Then we have a tough stretch here. 3 out of 4 games are really tough. San Francisco, the LA Chargers, the Rams. We don't know what the Rams are going to be. Are they going to be that elite team they were 2 years ago, or are they going to be the bums from last season? And then they play the Birds in Philly on November 5th. That's a tough stretch there. Then we go the Giants, Carolina, Washington, Seattle. If they want to be successful, they need to do really well in that stretch. They need to win against the Giants. They need to beat Carolina, Washington, and Seattle. They have to beat the crappy teams if they want to have a chance to make the playoffs, to either win the division or win another wild card. And then we go Philly, Buffalo, Miami, Detroit, Washington. Detroit has improved a lot. Philly and Buffalo are really elite teams in the NFL, and Miami is no slouch either, man, especially on the road. and then we end the season in Washington. The schedule is one of the tougher schedules in the NFC East, but it is not a schedule where every week you're like, oh man. There are some points in the season where you're like, okay, we're not playing elite teams for the foreseeable future. So we'll see what happens. All right, let's break down this roster. Let's see who the Cowboys added, who they got rid of in this offseason. They've only made 3 really major additions. Running back Ronald Jones and Brandon Cooks, who I think is washed, and I think Stephen Gilmore's washed too. So the roster didn't really improve too much. On the offensive side of the ball, we have Dak at the quarterback position again, and some of the key losses are Ezekiel Elliott, wide receivers T.Y. Hilton and Noah Brown. They didn't really play too much. Dalton Schultz at tight end. They lost Jason Peters, who was again hurt and old. Offensive guard Connor McGovern and D lineman Carlos Watkins. So pretty much the entire team is coming back this year. And then in the draft, the first 2 picks, they went D tackle and tight end. We'll see if this tight end Luke Schoonmaker can make a impression on the offense. Then they went pretty much defense the rest of the draft. The 3rd, 4th, and 6th round. They didn't have a 5th round pick. They had 2 6th round picks where they went cornerback and running back. We got CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and Michael Gallup. They have one of the best wide receiving cores in the NFL, but we'll see. The tight end position leaves a lot to be desired. And the offensive line, the key guys, Tyron Smith and Zach Martin, are getting older at 32 years of age. And then Tyler Smith, the center Tyler, and right tackle Steele, they're all in their lower 20s, so they're young, youthful guys. But in this 4-3 based defense, they really got to improve against the run if they want to win games consistently. If you're going to get shredded on the ground and giving up 122 yards, 130 yards, 150 yards every week, it's going to put a lot of pressure on that defense, man. They're going to get tired, and that's going to keep those cornerbacks and safeties and linebackers on the field longer. Micah Parsons is super exciting to watch, but I don't know how elite this defense is. They signed Trayvon Diggs to a long-term deal. He's a super elite cornerback, but he can't do it all himself, and it says Micah Parsons is a little banged up. So that leaves us with the Cowboys. I think they can win 11 or 12 games this year for sure. I don't know if they'll quite win 13 again. I think that was a little overachieving for them. But that 11-12 is not out of the realm of possibility for the Cowboys. I think they're going to be a good team again. They're going to be in a lot of games. That defense is going to keep them in games. And the offense, they just got to work on not turning the ball over, having their wide receivers get separation, and control the clock with the ground game. And the Cowboys could not only make the playoffs, but make a run and see if Dak Prescott can actually have some success in the postseason. He's a great regular season quarterback. He's actually one of my favorite players. His ability to keep plays alive and make throws down the field is super impressive, man. But he's got to do it when it counts in the playoffs. But we'll see what happens, man. All right, let's go on to the reigning NFC champs, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles had a great season last year. They went 16-4, including their playoff wins and that loss, unfortunately, to the Chiefs. All right, the offense was absolutely incredible for the Eagles. They ranked 3rd in points scored, 5th in total yards per play, 3rd in total yards per game, 2nd in passing yards per attempt, and 9th in passing yards per game. They were absolutely elite, and the defense was just as good. The Eagles really need to improve on the rushing yards per attempt at 4.6 yards per game. That is not acceptable. And they gave up over 120 yards on the ground. Their linebackers really need to step up. Nakobe Dean is going to be a starter, I think, this year, so he's really got to prove that he can stop the run. For the Eagles to win a Super Bowl, they have to be able to stop the run. But they were 8th in points allowed. I think a lot of that's because their offense was so good that they were on the field a lot. But they were also 2nd in total yards per play and 2nd in total yards per game. And they were also 1st in passing yards allowed per game at 180 per game. That is extremely impressive. The Eagles have a definite shot to return as the NFC representative in the Super Bowl and possibly get a ring. They have a lot of guys coming back this year. Jason Kelsey and the crew of all the old heads like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham are coming back for one more hurrah. So let's break down this Eagles schedule, guys. They open up the season at New England, and then they go Minnesota, Tampa, Washington, Los Angeles, Jets, Miami, Washington. The first 8 games, it wouldn't surprise me if the Eagles went 8-0. I mean, New England is mediocre. Minnesota is not very good. Tampa Bay and Washington are going to be hot garbage for sure. Tampa Bay and Washington are going to be hot garbage for sure. And then we go Rams, Jets, Dolphins, Washington again, and Dallas. Man, woo! That first 8 games are extremely winnable for the Eagles, man. And then it gets a little tougher after the first games. You go Dallas, Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco. Dallas again. That is going to be a super tough stretch, man. Look at that again, guys. Dallas, Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas. And then you got to go at Seattle. It's never easy to play in Seattle. And then we finish the season with Giants, Cardinals, Giants. So the Eagles' schedule is not very easy at all. Let's take a look at the roster and the depth chart. Let's go over some of the key additions to the team. They brought in Marcus Mariota to back up Jalen Hurts, which I think is a huge improvement to the team because Hurts does like to run the ball, so he might miss a couple games this year. And I think Marcus Mariota may be one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And Rashad Penny, the running back, that's a big addition too. And they also brought in DeAndre Swift, who looked really crispy in that few attempts he had in the preseason game. Tight end Dan Arnold, he's not really going to play because they have Dallas Goedert. And then they have Zacchaeus, Street, and Morrow, a receiver, an edge rusher, and linebacker. Some of the key losses are Miles Sanders. They're really going to miss Miles Sanders for sure. He signed with Carolina on a really good deal. He's a great player. He can run between the tackles. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He is one of the better, if not the best, running back in the NFL right now. They also lost Gardner Minshew to free agency. Offensive tackle Andre Dillard and Isaac Seumalo. That's going to be a big hit with depth to the offensive line, but I'm not really too worried about the offensive line because they're very elite. They have, if not the best, they are top 5 offensive line. And then they also lost Quinn and Hargreaves on the D line, but their draft was absolutely incredible. Bringing in the Georgia boys, D-tackle Jalen Carter, and linebacker edge rusher Nolan Smith. And then they went offensive tackle with Tyler Steen, safety Sidney Brown, cornerback Kaylee Ringo, and quarterback in the 6th round, I think he's from Stanford, Tanner McKee. So this team is going to be super elite again, man. The offense is absolutely incredible with Hurts, Swift, Brown, Smith, Watkins, and Dallas Goedert. I mean, their offensive line is absolutely incredible with Jordan Mailata, the absolute monster at left tackle, Landon Dickerson, Jason Kelsey, Cam Jurgens, and Lane tackle, rounding out the offensive line at right tackle. Lane Johnson is probably the best right tackle in the NFL, as is Jason Kelsey at the center position. The defense is getting a little bit older with Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox. So I think guys like Jordan Davis and Milton Williams are going to play a lot more. And Derek Barnett's coming back off of that Achilles tear. Where the Eagles live or die is going to be this linebacker position. Hassan Reddick had an absolute career year last year, but Nakobe Dean and Nicholas Morrow are unproven. The cornerbacks come back, James Bradbury and Darius Slay. So most of the defense is returning from the Super Bowl team. So I'm very excited for this year. It's going to be a very competitive NFC East. It's going to go Eagles, Cowboys, Giants, Commanders. But I do think that the Giants have a chance to catch the Cowboys. And if the Cowboys can shore up some of those things, man, they can compete for an NFC East title too. It wouldn't be surprising me if any of those 3 teams won the NFC East between the Giants, the Eagles, and the Cowboys. Let me know in the comments below, guys. What are your thoughts on the NFC East? Who do you think is going to win the NFC East? Are my picks good? Am I losing my mind? Let me know about my analysis in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Peace out.